Dirty Birds, what's up? And welcome to another edition of Falcons Final Whistle presented by Zaxby's. I'm your host, Will McFadden. I am joined by Tori McElhaney and Taryn Walk. We are celebrating the Falcons' first division win of the season, the first home win of the season, a 26-24 thrilling victory off of a game-winning field goal by Younghoe Koo. Tori, we'll start with you first. What's your quick summary of today's win?
So, on SNL, Stefan, where he's like talking about like these clubs or these nightclubs and or restaurants.
Is the hottest club in New York.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Think of him when I say that this game had everything. It had.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
You've never seen SNL?
It's great.
No.
Oh, Taryn.
Just sitting there like this.
Yes, and then hand over face. But it really did. This game had a little bit of everything except an offensive score, which we'll get into that later.
Yes.
But it did. It had a special teams touchdown. It had a Younghoe Koo longest career game-winning field goal, longest career field goal, just period, let alone game-winning. It had a pick six by Troy Anderson. I mean, it had a little bit of everything. Tyler Algier ran for our average 7.5 yards per carry, which is a banana stat. It had everything but an offensive touchdown.
Stefan would be really proud.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big butt, though. Talking about the offensive touchdown, not Stefan.
Big butt.
Taryn, what's your summary?
Oh, can we stop having it come down to the last second?
Taryn's done. She's done.
I had like 6 different graphs written like in my notes section just to be like, copy paste. This is what happened. Copy paste. This is what happened. Because 7 seconds left and you're like, it's a coin flip. Who's going to win this game? And as someone who has to have that story published at the buzzer for social, y'all are stressing me out. But I'm okay with gray hairs because as a blonde, it'll just make it look lighter.
Yeah.
So
that sounds like a very personal Taryn problem. I, for one, am excited that came down to the end. It was great.
Makes
Having
for
been
great
in your
TV.
shoes before, that it is stressful, and I feel for you. However, the Falcons are probably going to be in a lot of these games because that's just the way the NFL is played. And honestly,
Raheem said that verbatim.
Yep,
That's the National Football League. I was like, shh.
This league is designed to make that happen. But for me, this game was special teams from start to finish for the Falcons. That's
My
how
favorite.
they won this game. They made a huge play right off the jump. Kadarius Hodge jumping on that ball all the way through to the end. Younghoe Koo getting that game-winning field goal. So big special teams day for Atlanta. As Tori alluded to, it kind of needed to be because the offense had its moments, but couldn't really string together enough to ultimately get the ball in the end zone. So let's just run down a few stats from today's game. The Falcons did get 315 yards on offense, and they averaged over 6 yards per play, which is notable, but they just couldn't punch the ball in. Kirk Cousins was 21 of 35 for 238 yards with no touchdowns and an interception. Drake London was his favorite target. 12 times he looked Drake London's way. Drake caught 6 passes for 64 yards. Tyler Algier was actually the leading rusher in today's game. Tori, was that surprising to you?
No.
Really?
No, I think once you saw him break a couple of tackles, I think that it kind of clicked for not just the Falcons, but I think also the Saints. When you don't have someone like Demario Davis out there, and you kind of were down at that point a few key guys that would make those type of tackles where they're not, it's a very physical downhill runner in Tyler Algier. So I think I think Tyler had like one that was for like 11 yards. And after that, I was like, they're going to
him up into a lather.
Yeah, I was like, they're just going to feed him over and over and over again. And they did for the next however many, 8 attempts for 60 yards, 7.5 average, which again is crazy.
Yeah, Bijan had 11 touches total, 74 yards. Defensively, Troy Anderson led the way with 16 tackles, and of course, the 47-yard pick six. And then D. Alford chipped in with 9 tackles, a sack, and a huge pass breakup. The Saints, 366 yards of offense. They were 7 of 13 on third down, which we'll get into when we talk about the defense a little bit. Ultimately, Alvin Kamara just shy of 120 yards on 26 touches and a touchdown, but he was dangerous in spurts, didn't take over the game. And then the 2 top receivers, Chris Olave, 87 yards on 8 catches, and Rashid Shaheed, 83 yards on 8 catches. So,
and a lot of that production happened in the very first quarter.
Right.
You know, you look at kind of what that first quarter was. They had the Saints had well over 110 total yards of offense through the first quarter alone.
Do you want to know?
Yeah.
Ooh, I got you. The Saints had 103 offensive yards on 17 plays. The Falcons had 63 yards on 13 offensive plays.
When we talked about time of possession, I actually made this note to you, Taryn. It's fascinating because those numbers on the Falcons side are a little bit shorter because of Kadarius Hodges' kind of touchdown. So you lose a possession there, but that's a possession you're okay with losing because you get points out of it. When you see Troy Anderson take a pick six to the house, the offense isn't coming back out on the field, but you're getting points. So when we kind of look at the Falcons' overall offensive numbers, I think it's a little bit of a different scenario than the last 3 weeks have been, where those are more third down related, more kind of turnovers, things like that. Today, they didn't have the possessions because of some good plays by the other units. So let's go ahead and talk about those other units. The defense and special teams came up big in this game today. Tori, what does it say about this team that they are winning games like this?
I mean, the fact that you don't score an offensive touchdown and you still win the game, that hasn't happened. Taryn looked this up, and it hasn't happened since the Saints lost in 1983.
So the last time the Falcons won a game without scoring an offensive touchdown came in week 3 of the 2004 season.
Ooh.
It was a 6-3 home win against the Arizona Cardinals, and that had 8 turnovers in that game.
Lord.
That's wild. That is the sloppiest. Could you imagine watching a 6-3 game in which there are 8 turnovers? That's brutal. So it's a good thing we didn't have to sit through something like that and still came away with the win nonetheless. But yeah, I mean, is it encouraging though that even on a day when the offense isn't playing its best football, you figure out a way to kind of do what it takes to win?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot that you can take from this. I think that you take Tyler Allgeier's performance as a plus. You take the defense's second half performance as a plus. Special teams plus. I mean, there were a lot of good things that came out of this game, and you won because of these kind of offshoot moments that don't happen that often. A touchdown because of a muffed punt in the league doesn't happen that often. Younghoe Koo hitting a 58-yard kick doesn't happen that often. Troy Anderson's 47-yard pick six doesn't happen that often. You expect offenses to go down and score. That's the whole point, is to score points, to get in the end zone. That's their entire function. That didn't happen, and that's an anomaly in and of itself. And so I think as you're looking at this game, you should feel good about the way that I think your team ultimately won the game. But I think also the other side of the coin of that is this win was the exception to the rule, not the rule itself. And the Falcons as an offense over 16 quarters have only found the end zone 5 times through 4 games. And that's not going to be enough moving forward. You won this game, you go home, you take the win, you feel good about it, but you got to get back to work because this level of offensive output is not sustainable. The way they won this game is not a sustainable way to win games in this league, especially if you're wanting to be a postseason contender.
For sure. I can tell how excited you are to talk offense, and we're going to get there.
I know. I'll get there. We'll get there.
You know what, Taryn, let's stick with the kind of the highlights of today's game for just 1 second longer, though. And which of them was your favorite?
I'm going to go with Troy Anderson's pick 6.
Nice.
Because, first of all, it was the first of his career in both regards. He's back after an injury that kept him out majority of last season, so it's a big moment for him in general. But what fascinated me the most, I was looking it up because you see Chris Olave chasing him down.
Yeah.
And obviously Anderson's a bigger guy than Olave because Olave is really tall and lean. So I looked up their 40-yard dash times.
Was Troy's faster?
No. But which kind of makes it more impressive that he outran him. Mm-hmm. So sorry
Troy's
to burst that bubble.
Troy
was fast. He was fast for a linebacker, yes. But
he runs a 4.42.
Yeah.
Olave had a 4.39.
Oh,
yeah, we're talking about a heavyweight boxer versus a lightweight boxer.
I know, but the fact that Olave couldn't catch him is what I'm getting at here. Guys, let me get to my point. But that was my point. Thank you for listening.
Well said. I loved it. I would be really curious. Actually, Taryn, this may be up if you want to research while we're talking, but the next gen stats mile per hour on that play,
what Troy got to?
Yeah, I'm curious to see if that registered because not every say, like it's really just the top ones from each week, right? So like there's a chance that if it didn't break whatever threshold it is, but I had that thought when I saw Olave. First off, I was like, who is that even trying to give chase?
Right.
Because you saw like two Saints players down on the ground because I think the defense realized what was happening. The ball was in the air for a hot minute.
David Onyemata laid out an offensive lineman. That was kind of the one block that really, truly kind of sprung Troy Anderson.
I looked and I just saw all of this space and was like, oh, that's a touchdown. And then I just saw this kind of gold and black. Or white blur, I guess.
I knew immediately when Troy came down with it and you saw kind of where the pieces were, knowing his straight line speed, I was like, oh, there's no way he's not taking this to the house. There's not a chance.
And he was gone. I mean, it was really impressive to your point, Sarah.
He was a big deal in this game too. I think led the team with 16 total tackles, which I think makes sense considering the way you knew you needed to use him specifically to mount a I don't even know defensive I don't even know, like I almost said mount an offensive against Alvin Kamara.
Well, that's the thing, right? Raheem kind of throughout the week when asked about Alvin Kamara alluded to some of the linebackers that Atlanta has had in years past. Deion Jones kind of being, I think, first and foremost among those players who had the speed to really stick with New Orleans star running back. And Troy Anderson does as well. And that's what we saw out there on display. But you're right. Like there's a reason he was the game's leading tackler.
Yep.
He had that assignment and he played it very well. Like Alvin Kamara, as I mentioned, touched the ball 26 times and had a pretty good game, but he didn't take over the game. And that's kind of when you're playing an offense like this that is as explosive as New Orleans has been. Honestly, you can allow these guys to get their touches, but just don't let them get anything super dangerous against you. And that's what the Falcons have honestly done a really good job of all season long. But I think especially today, it was notable. So let's flip over now and touch on the offense. Tori, we'll go back to you. The Falcons once again held under 100 rushing yards, and they had 6 penalties on offense today, and a lot of those were really kind of costly penalties. Which of those two things, the lack of rushing yards for the second straight game or the penalties at pretty critical times, are you most concerned about moving forward?
I go back and forth because, yes, the penalties are concerning, but I'm concerned with the run game because it's kind of been hot and cold. Whereas penalties, I feel like the penalties that were called this game, one, there were a couple I didn't agree with, but also two, you do have a brand new center who hasn't started a lot of games in this league. I can kind of make some excuses for a couple of those penalties that were called on him. There was a hold on Jake Matthews.
That's the one that I didn't see.
Yeah, I didn't.
I mean, I did because you can see the jersey get tugged, but I just don't think that he was using the jersey to control the defensive lineman. I think he had control.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that as he moved, like the jersey got kind of pulled out.
Yeah. And if we go back in time and change that and that's not called and the Falcons score on that touchdown because there's a Bijan Robinson 19-yard touchdown, like perfectly executed outside of the holding penalty. Who knows how we think about penalties in the run game.
Would you feel better about the offense if that one play had been different?
Probably.
Yeah.
Like, I think I have to think so. And that's why this is such a hard question for me to answer and why I feel like I'm having a hard time articulating it because I just didn't. That one play changed the way that I looked at, which is crazy to say, but like that one play changed the way that I looked at penalties and rushing yards and all that kind of stuff.
So Taryn, we talked about kind of some of the penalties, but in the lead up to this game all week long, we were talking about third downs and time of possession. Atlanta finished 4 of 11 on third down offensively. And they were outpossessed ultimately by more than 10 minutes by the Saints. But as we kind of talked about earlier, some mitigating circumstances, I think, with that number in particular. But did you see enough from Atlanta in those two areas today to feel like they were addressed?
My gut is saying no.
That's fair.
Because, yes, they won. But I think you're seeing only like half of that complimentary football we talked about during the week.
Yeah.
Where, yes, the defense is doing its job. It's either forcing field goals or preventing touchdowns, or apparently scoring touchdowns themselves at this point. But the offense isn't like holding up their end where they're scoring touchdowns. So like time of possession doesn't really bother me in a sense that they won. They got the job done. The 4 of 11 on third down, again, they won. They got the job done. So like the numbers there, I can see why Raheem is like, oh, it doesn't matter as long as they win. But at the same time, it's just, as Tori was saying earlier, this is not a way to sustain success.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the key here. Where it's like, yes, they won. You cannot take that away from them. They are 2-2 at the end of the day. Doesn't matter what any of these game books, recaps, stories say.
Anything
like
that we
2-2,
Yeah.
and then 1-0 in the NFC South.
Right.
That's like the hardcore facts. But if they continue to operate offensively as they are right now, again, like Tori said, not sustainable. That's the key here. It's like you can't keep winning football games if you're not scoring touchdowns. And you can't keep relying on a pick six or a muff punt turn touchdown to do the job for you.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that's well said, right? It's about what's in your control and what you can prepare for and plan for and expect to have happen. And it's not sustainable to be expecting a pick six, to be expecting a muff punt. Those things are reliant upon other players that are not part of your team and not in your control. And I think the most telling part of this game to me, if Atlanta had not emerged with a victory, similar to against the Chiefs, everybody's looking at that 3rd and 1, the 4th and 1 at the end of the game. I was looking at that kind of final 2 minutes before the halftime, at the end of the first half, kind of that swing where Atlanta gets a stop on defense, then gets the ball back, an interception, Kansas City gets the ball back and is able to get a field goal out of it. Like that was a crucial point in the game to me. And in this one, when the Falcons got the ball back with just under 4 minutes remaining,
that one
offense,
was key for me.
And they couldn't figure out, they couldn't get a first down. They couldn't get that first down to kind of get out of the shadow of their end zone and keep the ball moving and eat up the clock. When we talk about the offense kind of having the game in its hands and controlling its own destiny, that's what we're talking about. And Darnell Mooney after the game, saying that he felt like this team did execute in some of these late game situations offensively well enough, but he would have given them a much better score, he said, if they had done better in that 4-minute drill. Like that is going to be something the offense harps on a lot, I think, throughout this week, because that's within their control and they didn't get the job done there.
When they got the ball back, I think it was like 3:37 on the clock.
The Saints should have never seen that ball again.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, well, let me write this story, be done with time to chill, refill my water.
Especially because in the drive before that started the fourth quarter, like Tyler Algier got 11, 15 yards, 7 yards.
Yep.
Like
you wanted to see that again.
Yeah.
And we didn't. I think we saw like 2 penalties that put them at like 1st and 25. And then they just like couldn't pick up any yards from there because they were so far behind the chains. And then they had to punt. And then you're giving the Saints the ball back with 3:32, I think it was, or something like that. Like it was only a 5-second swing.
20 seconds, I think, off of the game clock.
It wasn't much.
And one timeout, which is not what you want to do in that situation.
No, that's not. And then you give the ball back to New Orleans and they go down and have 3 chances on the one, and you can just see the strategy of like, we're not going to score until 3rd down because we're going to make Atlanta use both of their timeouts. We're going to bleed the clock. Honestly, if New Orleans would have won that game, it would have been because of that like series there.
Yeah. That's what you wanted to see from Atlanta when they had it with 3:30.
Yeah, that's
burn the clock.
situational football. Yep.
Yeah.
Today's episode of Falcons Final Whistle is brought to you by Zaxby's. And after a long game, when I'm tired and I need to refuel, I turn to Zaxby's. Their marinated, hand-breaded, fried to perfection chicken fingers, they hit the spot every time. Get yours with seasoned crinkle fries, a nice drink, and whichever of their 12 signature sauces you're feeling at the moment. But it always hits just right. So next time you need to refuel, go get yourself some Zaxby's.
The fact of the matter is like, if you don't have, like, who knows what would have happened it would have been 4th down, but like Atlanta gets the ball on their own 30 with 1 minute to go, no timeouts at all. There's a false start or snap infraction on the second play of that drive.
Yep, runs 10 seconds off. You
have 31 seconds to get into field goal range, and the next play was a DPI, which like you don't want
To rely on
a DPI to get you in field goal range. I mean, you'll take it. You'll take it all day long.
So at the very end of his kind of press huddle down in the locker room afterwards, Darnell Mooney was asked about that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such an interesting answer when we talk about like a savvy veteran. It's exactly this type of thing. He knew situationally, like he really needed just a DPI call there. So when the ball was in the air, he said, knowing that situation, knowing kind of what he needed to draw, he flashed his hands. And as a defensive back, you're always trained to look at the receiver's eyes and look at their hands because those aren't going to lie. So he flashed his hands a little bit early, and the defensive back, thinking that the ball's right there, reacts a little bit early. And so Darnell kind of goaded the defender into a DPI call. It's smart. That's smart football. I mean, if you're on the other side, if you're a Saints fan, what are you doing listening to this podcast? Go on and live your life. But I would be a little upset. However, that's part of the game, right?
I mean, it's strategy.
It is.
Like, you can't, you can't knock it because it's,
don't foul.
Yeah.
It's part of the game.
Yeah, don't run into him. Yeah. Don't hit him early.
You got to be aware of the situation too.
Right, yeah. You know that you cannot give up a 30-yard DPI.
Exactly. But what can't I do here? Get beat deep and give up a DPI.
Right. Yep. Those are the two things you can't do. And, give credit where credit is due for Darnell Mooney, like, to be able to have the wherewithal in that moment to be like, you know what? We need a DPI.
Gotta take one for the team.
Right, yeah.
He's been an awesome addition. I know we're mostly focused, having a lot on the defensive additions so far to start the year, but like Darnell Mooney, the connection that he's developed already with Kirk Cousins.
Yep.
Tori was on it at our season superlatives. Woo-hoo. So, that's a good way to transition to, I think, our game balls. So, Tori, we'll start with you. Who gets a game ball after today's win?
I think I'm going to give it to, I'm going back and forth between two guys, but I think Troy Anderson is going to win out just because of you knew going in the type of challenge he was going to have against Alvin Kamara specifically and how much he was going to be the guy that was going to have to stop Alvin Kamara. And even though Alvin Kamara still did have over 100 rushing yards today, I think that to your earlier point, they were able to contain him enough to where they kept themselves in the game. And I think Troy Anderson played a huge role in that. I think the fact that he led the team in tackles when he missed almost like half of the fourth quarter because of an injury to his knee, which that's something we'll need to monitor as the week goes on, because the Falcons are very quickly
short week.
It's a short week, and also they have Nate Landman on IR. Caden Ellis is, a starting inside linebacker, of course, but if Troy Anderson can't get the turnaround in time, you're throwing out there JD Bertrand, who I'm not saying he can't do it, but he's a rookie. Yep. And especially after seeing what Troy Anderson was able to do today, not even talking about the pick six, but he had a tackle for a loss that was a really big moment in the game. He had a PBU that was a really important moment in the game. I truly just think that not having him in this game and the speed that he has would have made a difference in what the Saints were able to do.
We also don't have any idea yet of like the severity of Anderson's injury, but then you think about the implications if it is severe, because this is a position group we have talked about since off season, preseason, all of the seasons of how stacked it is and how much potential there is and how creative they can get. Well, you're already down one. If you're down another, you can't really use that creativity anymore, and you're already early in the season.
No, it's something to monitor for sure. And we just don't, at this point, we don't know. I mean, at all.
It could be absolutely no worry.
Right.
It could be golden. Right. Golden goose.
Troy Anderson didn't go back into the game, and that's noteworthy.
It's possible cause for concern.
Yeah.
Yeah. One other injury, AJ Terrell left, was evaluated for a possible head injury. He did come back into the game, so no, I think long-term concern there.
Took a whack from Zach Harrison with some friendly fire.
That was a crazy play.
Yeah.
So we'll keep everybody updated on the Troy Anderson front, but a huge game from him. Taryn, who is getting your game ball?
My game ball is going to Younghoe Koo. I want to give it to all the specialists. Can they split it in 3?
Yeah.
Sure.
The 58-yard game winner is a huge thing, obviously. Like, it's the reason the Falcons won that game. But at the same time, like, They were clutch in 3 other instances. Like Youngway is now 9 for 9 on the season. They're perfect 100% together. And I was looking at it for my sidebar. These 3 together have been together since 2020. Liam McCullough, Bradley Pinion, Youngway Koo. And since then, Youngway has been over 90% on his field goals. And before them, he was in the 80s. He was like 81.
Fascinating.
And so it's just like this trio is now a trifecta. And yes, that line made my story.
I love that. I love it's a wrinkle of the game that not a lot of people, I think, realize, and how important it is, and how that continuity, even with those 3 specifically, matters. I don't know. They're a fun group too. They're so different from each other. They really are. They're so in sync. It's crazy. I love this group. They're so fun to watch, and they're so fun to watch interact together. And I mean, special teams, to go back to Will's very, very first point, like special teams can win you games.
Special teams did win.
I mean, game. And it was crazy too, because Youngway had a 44-yard field goal. He had a 53-yard field goal, and then the 52. And then a 50, and then the 58. Yeah. Like it wasn't.
There weren't any gimmies.
No, and
it was like an average of 49 yards.
I would like to go back to, remember when Youngway missed the field goals in the preseason,
the end of the world,
and everyone was dying.
Was that Baltimore?
Yes, I can't remember there. But
one of the preseason games that didn't matter.
I literally remember tweeting. I was like, I am not concerned with Youngway Koo at all. It's a freaking preseason game. Like, get over it. Y'all know how I feel about the preseason. And people were so mean, being like, but he missed 3 field goals. He's washed. Like, we can't rely on him anymore. And it's just like, come on. When Youngway Koo, knock on wood, when it is crunch time, more often than not, he steps up and performs.
I mean, it was just amazing how chill he, Pinion, and McCullough were in the locker room. Which is like business as usual. Like, guys, I gotta go home.
That's exactly what I want to see in a kicker.
100%.
None of them were bothered. They were like, we did it. It's fine. Yeah.
To just like absolutely be unfazed. Like the type of person who you're talking to for 2 minutes before they even realize that you're talking to them. That's what I want in a kicker.
And that is Youngway.
I was talking to both Bradley and Liam at the same time, and they just each had like no emotion toward the field goals. But then they were both like, oh my gosh, that was awesome, when talking about Daryl Hodges' touchdown on special teams. Yeah. I was like, there's emotion. Where was this the whole time? And they're like, he deserves that.
I'm glad Kadero got brought up in this segment. I'm not going to pick him for my game ball, but he is the other person that I think should probably warrant consideration. He did have, that was the Falcons' first, well, I should say the only muffed punt that they've returned for a touchdown in the 21st century. I did a lot of digging during the first quarter to try to find if this is the only time they've ever done it. The filters, I don't think they exist yet to be able to sort exactly by that type of data.
Probably.
But we did get confirmation from True Media that is the first time since 2000 that the Falcons have scored on a muffed punt, which seems interesting. I feel like they would have done it a little more frequently. Anyway, I am going to give my game ball to D. Alford because I think that the defensive plays that he made were very clutch. The sack came at a huge moment and kind of set the offense back where that drive. I don't think they were able to overcome that. And then, of course, the 4th down pass breakup right there. I mean, it was a matchup I think the Saints were targeting the entire way. I think they really liked Shaheed on D. Alford coming into this weekend, and he held up very well. It's been a little bit of an up and down start, I think, for D. Alford compared to last year when he started the year really strong and kind of emerged as a surprise guy that not a lot of people knew about. So this year, it's not been that, but this was a great game from him to hopefully get back on the right track, because the secondary has been, I think, the best part of this team so far. And if D. Alford picks his play back up to that level, like all 5, there's not going to be a single nit to pick.
No, I have nothing to say bad about the secondary, like at all. Like Mike Hughes also is just a guy who this year I have been so impressed by what I've seen from him and his play. I know he gave up a couple of passes, but this man's like downfield, or not downfield, open field tackling is something to marvel at. I love watching Mike Hughes play, and I will be the first to say that I did not give Mike Hughes enough credit going into this season.
I don't think anybody did. I mean, literally, if you had polled the Falcons fan base going into training camp, I think cornerback would have been right up there among the top positions that people were worried about, because it would have been pass rush and it would have been corner, because that's what everybody was talking about after the draft. That's what everybody was talking about going into mini camp in the preseason. Like, where's the pass rush coming from? Where is our cornerback? Who's our number 2 cornerback? And Mike Hughes has really answered that question, because you're right. He's very physical in the open field and he doesn't hesitate.
No, he's fun to watch. And I think he's one of those type of players too, that I think that this coaching staff saw something in him that I didn't see in him, that a lot of people didn't see in him, because they had every opportunity to go out and sign a corner. They had every opportunity to go out and draft a corner, and they didn't, because from go, Raheem Morris said, I like what I see in this secondary. I like what I see from this group. And I mean, a lot of that was liking what he saw from Mike Hughes specifically. Mike Hughes is showing us kind of that belief in him is paying off very early in this season.
All right, so going to wrap us up here in just one sec, but let's quickly look ahead to Thursday night. And because a lot of this podcast has been spent talking about how the offense needs to start kind of controlling its own destiny, Taryn, what is one thing you need to see from the offense against Tampa Bay on Thursday night?
It's as simple as score touchdowns. I mean, they're entering week 5 with only 5 touchdowns on their resume.
You want them to match that on Thursday night?
5 touchdowns in week 5.
Yeah.
I'll settle for 1.
There you go.
They just need to. I'm sorry. You have the defense and special teams tonight, each scoring touchdowns. The offense needs to score touchdowns.
Tori?
For those that don't know, Will makes these cute little pages that has like all these different,
cute.
they're
Thank
really
you.
cute,
Yeah.
and they have like little questions and little notes and everything. And he kind of said, this questions is almost like a wish list item. For example, a 100-yard game from Kyle Pitts, a better than 50% third down performance, 150 rushing yards, etc. So
We want all of it.
He gave us some options, and I would say I want all of it. But I just looking at Tampa Bay specifically, I think this is a really good opportunity, having seen, even though the Bucs beat the Eagles pretty significantly on Sunday night, they gave up 8.5 yards per carry average to Saquon Barkley. 8.5 is crazy.
Yeah,
like here,
wild.
I thought that 7.5 for Tyler Algier tonight was crazy. 8.5 is even crazier. He had a long of 54. He had an explosive catch of 27. My answer, I kind of want it to be married in this idea of explosive plays.
Yeah.
I want to see some explosive runs as much as anything. I think that if you can get that one step in the run game, it makes a difference. I think you saw it, having gone back and, looked at the way that the Falcons ran the ball against the Eagles. If you can get Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson to their second or third step, it makes a huge difference. And I want to see more of what we saw with the run game against Philadelphia. And I think you saw glimpses of it with Tyler Algier tonight, and kind of his bulldozer-esque type of running style and physical. I want to see the Falcons front out physical the Buccaneers, and the way that shows up is in the run game for me.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing that we came into the season saying, the Falcons can run the ball. They've got a great offensive line. They've got 2 amazing running backs. So yeah, I'd love to see them kind of get back on track on the ground. And it's crazy, the Eagles, I feel like last week against the Saints too, they had an insane amount of yardage and just low amount of points. And it sounds like, I don't have the box score right in front of me, but it sounds like that was kind of the case as well. So,
but the Eagles gave up almost 450 total yards of offense to the Bucs.
I feel confident Atlanta's defense will do better than that.
Okay.
Shout out to the Eagles for giving the Falcons a preview of next week's opponent each week.
Every week, yeah.
How about that?
They have their own game tape too. It's like one domino after another.
It's like the migration pattern when they're in a V. We're just like back to the right of the Eagles.
Yeah.
So they're getting that win just before we are. Yeah. Bird knowledge, Taryn. You didn't know that's what you were getting on today's podcast.
Could have lived without it.
All right. So I really want to see just a back-to-back touchdown drives. I think that
That's
this
a good
is
one.
anecdotal, but it feels like every time the Falcons have like one of their best drives and they march down, it's like, that looked really easy. Then the next drive, it looks
really hard,
much more difficult.
Yeah.
And I just want to see like the style of game that I think the Falcons want to play is build that lead, create a turnover, a negative play on defense, get the ball back for the offense, get that lead even further established. And that's the second part that they haven't really been able to hit yet. But you kind of saw it coming to fruition against Kansas City. That second offensive drive, they weren't able to. So back to back, like let's get the offense really humming and let's get them, for a full quarter, for a quarter and a half, like where they just are getting everything they want instead of this kind of fits and starts nature that it's been, because they've looked really good at times, but then it just seems to go away for one reason or another. So
I like that. I'd like to change my answer to that.
I gave you 3 great options here on this cute little piece of paper. No, that's that we can all share that, because I think that the theme, we just need to see the offense pick it up a little bit. Kyle Pitts also should say 0 catches, 0 yards. So I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who want to see him get going as well. And a division game is a great time to do that. So that will do it for today's post-game podcast. Again, the Falcons getting a huge win, 26-24 here at Mercedes-Benz Stadium to take a 1-0 record in their division so far. But we've got 2 more division games coming up, and honestly 5 here before the bye week. So the Falcons are in their most critical stretch, but they start that stretch with a win, and that is all that matters. So again, you guys can catch us next on Friday, recapping Atlanta's Thursday night game against the 3-1 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But until then, everybody, take care.